Welcome to this edition of Leaders Corner, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the voices of Army Reserve leadership in a way that's engaging, vibrant, and informational. I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Jeremiah Richardson. Today we're going to do something a little different. We've tended to have a lot of senior NCOs on the program, but we don't want to limit the perspectives we offer to you all to just those viewpoints. We'd like to bring in some senior officers as well. With that in mind, we have someone very unique here today. His name is Colonel Eric Rahman. He's an Army Reserve Assistant Chief of Staff, G3, with the 311th Signal Command out of Tustin, California. Now, Rahman's not your run-of-the-mill staff officer either. And let me tell you why. He's managed to do an enlisted career, finishing as a senior drill sergeant, studied at the University of Louisville, and earned multiple degrees from the University of Massachusetts while playing two sports and doing ROTC as an SMP cadet in the Guard. He earned a commission, attended the U.S. Air Force Space and Cyber Schools, and dealt extensively in communications and cyber operations. He's also deployed to Iraq and gained a plethora of joint experience. And he's managed to do all of this over 18 years as an officer while maintaining a robust civilian career. Now, that sounds like a lot. And right now, he's actually also in a civilian job, a leader with Google and responsible for their Army business. So, Colonel Rahman, that sounds pretty awesome. You're like the closest person I've met to a real-life astronaut and your Army.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Sergeant Richardson. Glad to be here.
So tell me a little bit about why you ultimately decided to make the jump from green to gold.
So that's an interesting question. I think, if you go back to when I first enlisted, the first thing I ever wanted to do was to be a drill sergeant, because when I was going through basic training, I think that, everyone who's ever been through basic training has always looked up to their drill sergeants who mentored them. And that was the first example of a leader that I ever met in the Army. So, ultimately it started off with, hey, I want to do that. And then, the longer I was in, I thought, well, if I'm going to stay in long enough, I think if I have a choice between ultimately being a first sergeant or a company commander, I think I'd like to go, be the company commander. So I literally went from being an acting first sergeant to a company commander, overnight with a direct commission, which is kind of a unique position to be in. But it's been a great ride.
The majority of us enlisted soldiers have really very little idea about what senior officers do on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure many of my young Joes think that you're up there sipping coffee, pontificating. But I imagine in the realm of cyber operations and the other things you do, it's a lot more than we realize, right?
Well, I think the difference between, being junior enlisted, a senior enlisted, or even a company or a senior officer is that the higher up the food chain you go, the more time is spent preparing and the less time is spent executing. So in my case, it's hours and hours and hours of prep time, with others coordinating, so that when you finally arrive there, and you could probably attest to just in your coordination and executing a podcast like this, you spend all this time preparing for what is ultimately, a short, window of this podcast. But, as a senior officer, it's just a lot of planning time. It's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of conversations with different folks, up and down the chain, making sure that they've got all the resources they need to be successful.
Yeah, I got a little bit of a taste of that as a training in NCO, working alongside, operations officers. And just seeing, through Private Joe, he just knows he went to AT.
Right.
Everything that it took just to get that going is quite the amount of work. So
I spent a bunch of time planning exercises several years back, the communications portions thereof. And I can tell you it's literally a year's worth of preparation with a whole bunch of folks making sure every detail is I is dotted and T is crossed, so that when the units arrive, on station, in our case it was at Fort McCoy, that, every single contingency had been thought of, every single, communications. If this goes down, what are we going to do? Our pace plans, everything. So, it can be very involved, but at the same time, it's great to finally see things hit the ground and then see a plan come together.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like there's always some other stone that hasn't been left unturned when it comes to planning in detail.
Well, no plan survives first contact, right? So
that's true. So your bio, I saw it, obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was pretty impressed. It's like bursting at the seams with action. Now you're an Army Reserve TPU officer. How on earth have you managed to do this, all of this, maintain a civilian career?
That's a great question. And a lot of the folks I mentor ask me, the same thing. It's something I asked a lot of my mentors growing up. I'll tell you, it's probably one of the most difficult things is that balance between your civilian career, your military career, and your personal life. And quite honestly, the three are never in balance. At one point in your life, especially as you're starting out with a family, et cetera, that piece is definitely going to be taking precedent. There are times where you deploy and your military career kind of takes over. Command time, it tends to do that. And then, there are times where you're really gung-ho at your civilian career and you're trying to do everything you can. Either you're looking for a promotion or you're just trying to finish a project or complete something. And, that's there. But, it hasn't been easy. I got to tell you, as somebody who's been in 28 years now, I've been laid off from a civilian job 3 times, one of which was, several of which are directly related to my military service. And it's difficult because while the Uniformed Services Employment Reemployment Rights Act, or USERRA, as we know it, has protections out there for reservists, nobody tells you what to do when your employer walks up to you and says, hey, how many more weeks are you going to be doing this year? I mean, do you have to go do all these, exercise? Are you going to be gone for more time? And, there are protections out there. I mean, they might keep your job, but they certainly aren't going to help you when you're up for a promotion and all of a sudden, since you were gone, they gave it to somebody else. And there's a lot of gray areas where it's just difficult, especially if there's a layoff within the company. They can include a reservist in that layoff and really there aren't really any repercussions, because if it's part of something they were doing anyways, then it happened. In my case, that was one thing that happened to me. So it's difficult, but I think one of the biggest tips I give a lot of the younger folks is nobody likes to be surprised, right? So when you have a training schedule for your entire year, get that in your employer's hands. Let them know ahead of time, hey, listen, these are all the places I know I have to be. There's going to be a few more. I might have a professional military education I've got to do for a couple of weeks. I might have another piece I've got to do for a couple of weeks. But the more heads up they know and the more time they get to absorb all that, the easier it is for them to prepare. What people don't like is coming in at the last second saying, oh, by the way, I'm going to be off this Friday, the Thursday right before that.
Yeah.
And, and to me, there's an onus on both the reservist and the employer to come together and try to make that work. So, that's my advice to a lot of the younger soldiers, is really communicate as much as you can with your employer and just try not to surprise them.
I imagine that having experienced some of the things you have, in terms of the frustrations with the TPU enlisted career and actually officer career and employers, has made you maybe more of an understanding commander, I'd imagine, when it comes to these kind of relations.
Definitely, and I've stepped up on behalf of a lot of my soldiers and personally talked to employers. I've written letters on their behalf, anytime I can get involved. And a lot of the times it's education. So, a couple of times in my career, both at IBM and both at Gartner, I've had the chance to lead veterans networking groups there. And as part of that, we incorporated a boss lift through the ESGR, or the Employer Supported Guard Reserve Program. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you what, those go such a long way. So if you ever have the ability to get your civilian employer on one of those boss lifts, it's great. They usually, set up training, and you can even set one up within your unit whereby you can, get your employer out there during your annual training, during a battle assembly weekend, so they can see what you're doing out there, and then they have a certain appreciation for it. And then I think when you're asking for time off in the future, they tend to be much more understanding because they know exactly what you're going to be doing and they understand the importance of it all.
Yeah, I think that's a really awesome program, and I hope the Army Reserve finds ways to flesh that out. I know our sister components, or even components within the Army, like JSOC, the USASOC, sorry. They have a great boss lift on Fort Bragg that's amazing, and the employers go crazy for it. But having that firsthand experience really helps out a lot. What's another thing I've noticed sometimes with that is sometimes a soldier won't tell you that they're having problems with their employer until it's like a problem.
Well, many of them don't know. I think there's so many things, especially the more junior soldiers, there are so many things that they don't know, whether it's just, the expectations of them in the Army Reserve, their rights there. And so that's why these classes are are incredibly helpful. And a lot of commanders, just don't know that their soldiers don't know. So constantly reinforcing it and giving even the same class that you might have given, on USERRA or ESGR a year ago at the holiday, party, you might want to do that a little bit more, a couple of times a year. Now with the virtual world, it makes it easier for people to do it or record it so that people can hear it. But, oftentimes, those messages, we do them that one time and then we assume everybody knows about it. Well, meanwhile, 50% of the units turned over between now and, the next time next year, the next briefing. So it's just got to be like anything else. They've got to hear it, time and time again.
So when it comes to your civilian career, what does it mean to be an Army business leader at Google?
So Google's been a phenomenal company to work for. I got to tell you, this was really a destination company for me because of the culture. It's really got a bunch of amazing leaders. I work for, a lot of folks with prior service and really amazing backgrounds. I mean, I walk into the room and, I'm the dumbest guy there sometimes. So it's the caliber of folks around me I'm just blown away by. But ultimately what we do is we help the Army use technology to solve problems. So whether it's readiness, whether it's COVID, whether it's, modernization, all those challenges, where Google brings their expertise to the table, it's mainly in the realms of artificial intelligence and machine learning, data and analytics, you name it, everything in that realm that we can help with. I mean, as a company with, over 9 apps with 1 billion users each, they've got a lot of knowledge as it relates to cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and how to leverage that for the benefit of the military. So there have been a lot of ongoing projects, be it, virtual reality stuff off the shelf, mobility, you name it. But, basically the world is, open to us. Anything within that Google umbrella, we have the ability to bring, to value for our customers.
What's your experience been with them when it comes to employer TP relationships?
That's been fantastic. I mean, my immediate boss was an F-16 bus driver, so he's,
Nice.
Very understanding. And we've got, his boss over him was a retired Air Force 06 as well. So, they know the drill. They've worn the uniform, so they're unbelievably understanding. But I got to tell you, as a company, man, what a phenomenal company. Right now, we're in the process of hiring 20 interns to our Heroes to Hire program, where they're going out and finding active duty folks, basically like the Training with Industry program that the Army has.
Yeah.
A lot of mentorship along the way. We get to take people, get them under the covers and actually show them how Silicon Valley, behemoth like Google works. And they can bring that expertise back to the military with them. And then hopefully later on in civilian life, they can use that as a springboard to their own civilian careers.
I've been out to Moffett Field a few times at the 63rd Readiness Division, and I saw the Google campus is tremendously large. It's just huge.
Yeah, that's an awesome thing.
So you've had some good experience on both sides in terms of dealing with leadership when it comes to civilian side and the military side. Like, what lessons do you take from the civilian world leadership to apply to the military? And then we'll talk about vice versa.
Sure. I think when you work for a company, like a Google and some of the other companies I've worked with over the years, IBM, Dell, Gartner, et cetera, they each have strengths, whether it be the rigor that they use for the processes. In my case, it's, any process and anything is open for discussion. If there's a better way of doing it, we actually have part of the company culture is that you can actually take, a certain percentage of your time and work on what we call a moonshot or something else that is just of interest to you that could be something more substantial. And after a certain period of time, they actually look at that project and say, go or no go in terms of continuing on and making that like your full-time job. So if you look at something like Gmail, that actually came out of the incubator that Google had at the time to have somebody just go create something in a better way of doing things. So if you look at like the Google Docs platform, et cetera, the fact that multiple people can be inside a document all collaborating at the same time, those types of lessons in terms of modernization are what we want to bring to the military. So as I look at problems, I look at things within my own unit, the way we measure readiness, the way we use data and analytics and data visualization. I keep thinking about, well, how can we make this process better, right? Because Chief of Staff of the Army talks about we want to move away from being an industrial age Army and move to an information age. Those are the things we have to bring. I mean, if you look at a battle assembly, what's the first thing you do when you walk in the door after formation? You sign in with a ballpoint pen
Oh yeah,
on
that's
a piece of paper like it's 1940, like you're waiting for the pay officer to show up and then give you straight hard cash. I'm like, it's 2020, people. There are better ways to do this. We have GPS technology, and we have ways to quote unquote take attendance that are significantly more modern. But it starts with the way people envision it. So we're in a war for talent right now. We want to keep the most talented folks that we can in our Army. And in order to do that, we need a process that's better than, fill out this, one form and email it to 5 people in order to get paid in a couple of weeks kind of thing. And there's no monitoring of the process. You can't see any of the workflow, et cetera. So it's those types of things that we want to bring those best practices back to the Army to help modernize.
That brings about a larger conversation about how to get that moving within bureaucracy and get the engine moving, right? When you have new innovative ideas. And
sure.
I know that can be probably difficult for you on your end sometimes.
Well, I think what you got to do is you got to find those champions out there. There are senior leaders, and most of us know the senior leaders that don't want to break glass and they don't want to take chances and they don't want to rock the boat. But there are some that are genuinely passionate about transforming the way we work, right? So those are the folks you need to go latch onto. And those people aren't necessarily wearing the most rank, that just, some of the subject matter experts. It could be, the senior sergeant in a motor pool. It could be, a senior admin person in an HR office. Those are the folks that, have the expertise. They probably know what's broken too. You go to any senior NCO and ask them about a simple process like running a range or something, they can tell you the best way to do it, and they can tell you what's broken about the process and what we need to fix. So, I look for those champions who are willing to go, break some glass and figure out better ways to doing things and not just do things the way we always have, and let those people help champion those ideas up through the chain. And eventually, some of those senior leaders are going to look at that. And as the digital natives kind of rise and rank, I think there'll be more of an appetite for it.
That sounds to me a bit like trying to create a culture where, new ideas are welcome. And I think there's a hesitancy sometimes amongst, once you start to get mid-career for soldiers, to be like, let's not rock the boat.
That's absolutely right. And that's why I challenge all of my peers to not get complacent, because, it's so easy to tell somebody no. It's a lot harder to let them have that freedom to go try to, solve things. That's why I love, the idea of the Army Software Factory right now, because the answers to most of our problems are sitting in our ranks, in our formation right now, and we just need to tap into that energy. So, many of those folks who grew up on these digital platforms while they were going through school, they're used to working like that. Some of the folks that grew up, pre-internet, pre-email, et cetera, they're just starting to get to those senior levels. And, eventually those digital natives will have those positions. And I think we'll be able to really force some change. And, I'm extremely happy with the change the current Chief of the Army Reserve is making. I mean, she's out there on social media, and she actually asked, "Hey, I want to jump in your battle assembly virtually." I'm like, "That's fantastic. That's exactly what we need." Because when she's in there with the CSM, getting ground truth from those units, that's how you figure out what needs to be fixed and how to take those issues back up higher. So I really applaud her for doing that.
Yeah, I do like the direction that our new Lieutenant General is going to be taking. But something you mentioned earlier kind of reminds me. I had the fortunate opportunity to work at U.S. Special Operations Command, signed as an AGR. The cool thing about being there that I liked was that when I came up with a new idea, I wasn't told no immediately from the outset. It was more like, can it add to our mission? Tell me how it adds to our mission. Okay, let's see if we can make it happen. It was there, but you had to. If you were able to justify what you were doing, they're all about innovation. And
having some time at SOCOM myself, I can attest to the culture within the special operations community embraces that stuff, because those operators on the ground, they're the ones who are coming up with those suggestions. So
yeah, and that permeates the entire culture. Like new ideas out of the mission, it's almost an automatic yes. And and I think people like you bringing some of that mindset into the Army Reserve can really help us going forward. So I hear also that you are thinking about starting your own platform to talk about these kinds of ideas. Is that supposed to be like a podcast, a YouTube channel? What are we talking about?
So the idea came about, in talking to some of my colleagues. When I think about every assignment that I've ever been at in the Army Reserve, the one thing that holds true is that I've just worked with some amazing people, and of all ranks, of all ethnicities, of all backgrounds, and people who are just unbelievably resilient and have overcome a lot of personal adversity in their life. So I mean, just from my own personal experience, I've been laid off several times. I got divorced 6 years ago. I've been through that. I've been through a lot of the challenges that we face. My father came over here on a boat from Mosul, Iraq in 1959 and, made a life for himself. And I was out on my own, pretty early, having to work my way through school, et cetera. A lot of people have had issues where they've had to rise up. I don't care if it's a single parent trying to raise a son or a daughter or more, while serving, folks that are going to school and finishing up their education while they're working, while they're supporting a family, et cetera. And then I've got these unbelievable stories of, colleagues of mine who have been CEOs of civilian companies, and, one who's an SES right now as a major in the Army Reserve. They literally had to rewrite the regs to allow them to do that, to take those civilian skills and bring them. But, just some amazing stories of people overcoming and persevering. And so I want to be able to have a platform to tell their stories. So, it's been great to talk to folks like yourself and others who have kind of given me some advice as to how to best tell those stories. And the idea would be to call it the Noodle Bowl, just because, ramen's a good thing. And
Nice.
everybody's had some ramen in their career, right? So, thinking about how we could do that maybe over a lunch setting where somebody can, grab a bowl of ramen and pull up a chair and we can all talk about some of these stories and really get inspired.
That's really neat. I know we've been talking a lot about adversity in the workplace and trying to overcome that, but yeah, you're right. Some of the most resilient people I've ever met are in the military, and I look forward to supporting that. And for anybody who's curious, we will actually have the link of his podcast or platform. And do you have a name for it or a website there, sir?
Well, we don't yet, but I will put it up there on the Army Reserve link as soon as we have it. But we're going to call it the Noodle Bowl, and that's going to be the name of the podcast. And again, looking forward to telling the stories of a lot of our great brothers and sisters who have really overcome adversity and really just trying to pack some inspiration into every day.
Yeah, we could definitely use more of that in 2020.
Definitely.
For sure. So you kind of communicated to me what you hope to accomplish with your platform. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Well, I'll probably still be doing this because my MRD is not till 2031. So I've literally got the next 11 years to go figure out how I can make the most impact within the Army Reserve period. At that point, I don't know civilian career wise how much longer I'll do this. I'll probably I'm looking at probably a 5 to 10 year horizon before I decide to either, cut down to some sort of part-time status or spend some time, maybe take an ADOS tour or something. But, I'm really just looking to make the broadest impact I can on the most lives that I can while I'm here. And, a lot of this now is to a point where you spend so much of your earlier part of your career trying to figure out, how to do that next job, et cetera. And I think somewhere around those field grade years, you realize it's not about you. It's about giving back to all those other folks who have helped you get there. So, at this point, it's, how can I give back? How can I find ways to help people's lives and, take the experience that I've gained and help others with it.
You said something there that really reminded me of a recent interview I did with Lieutenant General Daniels. And she mentioned that she wants her soldiers to start looking at two positions from then, look down the road that far of where you
Sure.
see yourself, where you envision yourself, because that'll give you not only a long-term goal, but, it just starts to set your path of where you want to go.
Yes.
I think you'd be great working the ESGR personally, just because we could really use somebody with your mindset and that and your experience. But anyway, so I just want to thank you for having you on the program, sir. And like I said, for anyone who's interested in his Noodle Bowl, is that what it's called?
Noodle Bowl, absolutely.
Noodle Bowl. As soon as he has it up, we will link it below the video. Just click down there below me. And that's it for this edition of the Leader's Corner. We have upcoming episodes where we will introduce the new Chief of the Army Reserve, Lieutenant General Jody Daniels, to give her an opportunity to flesh out her plans for the Army Reserve. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for listening.